thanks to Architecture Foundation, we can have this, I can call it discussion here, because I will be short in my presentation. Today, first, I will start to present a little bit the situation, about the climate, and a little bit about the culture of living in the desert of Iran. I'm not talking about Iran. I'm talking about the central desert of Iran, because the hard climate there, it makes it really difficult for living this area. And we can learn a lot of stuff from the architecture of this region, because in a short sentence, maybe I can say, we can learn from the people of that region how we can live almost with nothing, with a little sand on the ground, how we can manage living. And maybe this point of view can help us to a sustainable future. So, Rosie, if you think that's okay, I will start the presentation. I will share the screen.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the activities that I will present here, they are all under Esfahk module of this almost nothing. It can help us just okay, I will start the presentation. That I will present here is like about 2 years that we have started in East Iran, Esfahk. So just to have an idea about the place, if you can see, the big circle shows what we know as Persia, and if I circles on the map, and little circle is the area that I wanted to talk about, the desert, the central deserts of Persia. I didn't use a map with political divisions, because that's not what we intend to study here. What we need to know is about the condition of this area. Actually, the desert in this region that you saw is not suitable for living, and people can live only beside the mountains. As you see in the picture, in the left picture, you see there's a mountain. Underneath the mountain, there are sources of waters. Then people conduct this water to the heart of desert, where there is a flat land that they can live and they can cultivate. So suddenly you will see a green area like this garden that is known as Shazdamahan Garden in Kerman. And suddenly in the middle of the desert, you will discover something like paradise, because this contrast makes like paradise. Actually, if it was in a green area, if it was in London, maybe it was not really a big garden, but the contrast that you have in this area that people created, it make these gardens as a miracle. But not only the gardens, I want to go to the garden, but the place that we work. So now we are going to Khorasan province. Khorasan province in the central desert is located in East Iran, not very far from Afghanistan. So here I will show you 3 villages here. The third one is the one that we established our research center in that. The first one that you see here, named Naiband, as you see, on left you have the mountains, so they can they have the source of water underneath the mountain, and then you see the village, and in front of that you have the agriculture land, in fact. If you go closer, actually in some villages like this, that they have more woods, so they have flat roofs, but the main material is earth. So they use earth. They have flat roofs. In this area, it's mostly, I can tell it's like clay. Mostly it's clay. It's not sand, it's most clay, and they make adobes, or they use cup techniques to bring up walls. And here in this village, because they have more woods than the other one, so then they put the woods to have the flat roofs. And this village that you see here is still alive. People are still living in this village. And it's interesting if you could travel to Iran, you go and visit this place to see how people, because there are no many places that people live in the same condition. Most of these villages are abandoned. So the second village I will show you in Khorasan province, again in East Iran. There is another one named Esfandiyar, exactly the same condition. So you have the mountain, then you have the building and the agriculture land. So this village is completely abandoned. And it's not because of earthquake of a problem, it's just because not very far, they have made, in fact, governments some years ago, like decades ago, they made new buildings, and they didn't bring electricity and water, or I mean water pipe, to the old village. So all the people moved to the new village. But this village is very interesting because they have several storage buildings. As you see here, so underneath the buildings, you see the corridors that they are all covered, and they are not the structure, the roof didn't bring electricity. This village is, as you see, covered, and they are not, it had been created by bolts, and it's really an amazing structure. It's hard to make these bolts to bear the weight of all the other stories above it. And the third village here is the village that we decided to establish a research center there. It's named Esfahk. And exactly the same condition as the other villages. Here there are less woods, so the roofs, they are made by domes or vaults, mostly vaults. And everything you see has been created by earth. Again, the source of water, if you condition, and by domes or vaults, mostly the source here, left of the picture. So when you go into the mountain, you will see the source of water. The village exists because this little source of water that you see here and comes to the village. And this village, actually 40 years ago, there was a strong earthquake hit the region of this village. It didn't hit the other villages, the two villages that we saw before, but this village damaged by the earthquake. And after the earthquake 40 years ago, people left the village and they made new homes just 10 minutes by walk from the old village. They never came back to this old village. So for 40 years, this village is abandoned. And you see a lot of destroyed buildings, but this damage is not mainly because of earthquake. In the earthquake, 80% of these buildings, they were untouched. Just 20% of the home. And this village, this village damaged by, they made new homes just for 40 years, this village. And mainly because of erosion and because of the wind and other stuff, and they're not repaired. Recently, some villager, they decided recently, it's like 5 or 6 years, some villagers, some young guys of the village decided to renovate the old village, and they started with some homes, and an architect beside them named Farmars Farsi, that next week we will be together to talk about the village, especially about the renovation of the village. Help these young guys of the village to renovate the village. So they renovated like 6 homes, not more than that. But what I want to talk about is not about the renovation, because we will see it in next week. We will study that with Farmars. What I want to talk about today is how we can learn about from the ruins of this village, and how we can learn architecture, and we can use this knowledge for the future of architecture. When you go into the ruins of the village, you see many earthen techniques and many mixed earthen techniques, like this one. The walls here are excavated walls into the ground. So they're excavated, they are not walls by adobe or cob or something like that. There is no also ram dirt. So they excavated, and the roof they made by using adobes. And the interesting thing is that they didn't use any mold, or it's free spanning vault actually. There's no any mold or coffrage in the other word. Actually, they don't have access to wood, so they invented some techniques that they could make all the buildings without using a single piece of wood, even for the construction. The art of these buildings, mainly, they are into the art of creating these walls. As you see here, the way they arrange the bricks, they can stay on themselves and create the ceiling. What we see here, there are different type of walls that they have invented. During 1,000 years, these techniques they have been developed, and they reached this typical walls. As you see at the end in this image, you see 2 kinds. At the end of the image, you see on the corner there is one technique, the other one you see in front of you, and you have another one here. Totally, there are 4 techniques for making the roofs, that all the village has been created by these 4 techniques. But these 4 techniques for vault making, they are really flexible actually. So they have a grant like this that they excavate, and the plan of the building is not really geometrical, and they can cover it with these vault techniques. So actually, I told you that we decided to establish a research center there to study how these people, how this knowledge has been shaped during the centuries, and how we can use it for architecture, for contemporary architecture, actually. There was an old school in the village. You see the school here. Actually, we renovated this school, the old school. They didn't use this school anymore. And we turned it into the research center. We organized workshops also there. Sometimes from other countries also join us, and we have international workshops there. So we start, when the students, they come there, we start to discover the region, like 3 villages that you saw there. And then on one side, the students sometimes, they participate in the renovation of the buildings to learn. And sometimes we have like 1 week training, and we bring old masons. These old masons, they are not a lot. And if they die, there is no one else that know these techniques. These techniques, I mean, how you can make your ceiling without a single piece of wood or concrete or steel. So sometimes we bring in 7 days or 10 days courses, we bring these old masons to teach to the students how traditionally they create these walls. There is no any written thing about these techniques actually. And after the students learn, they start to realize something themselves, like the home that you see here. And another interesting part maybe is that this heavy work, normally known as men works, but in our workshops, there are mostly girls that they are involved in the construction process. And you see how they could make a real home themselves at the end of, this was a two weeks workshop. And for sure, they celebrate inside what they make, and they enjoy it normally at the end of the workshop. And sometimes we study with a very primitive ways because we don't have a lot of tools there. So with primitive system method, we test sometimes the structure to see how it collapses. And sometimes there are students that they have very creative mind, and they bring new ideas for documenting the traditional method of construction, like this one, that actually one of the participants in one of the international workshops, that I know him as my friend now, actually, Eduardo Ferrari from Italy, that recently is, I think he's studying in Oxford Brookes now. In fact, he brought a camera and put the camera into the head of the mason to exactly film the process of the construction. So like this, he says that we can document it very well. And after this mason, we lose these masons, the knowledge will not die. Besides all of this, we are trying to document these methods, and we try to bring a method to be able to use to be used for the architects. The architects will be able to, by reading these documents that we are preparing, they will be able to create the techniques, the walls themselves. So these drawings they have been done by another colleague named Behnaz Motarjem. As you see, they exactly describe what you should do. Still, we are going on with completing these documents. I just wanted to show you what I'm doing. This one is very interesting because if there is need form work, because I told you that they don't use form work because they don't have wood there. But sometimes you really, really, really need form work. If you really need form work, you don't have wood. So there's a technique that they use gypsum, but this technique is not special for Khorasan, but is all over central Iran, central desert of Iran. They use gypsum and to create the walls, and it's very easy and really fun. On the other hand, the students, they study the techniques over the models, so they exactly understand how they can be created. And you know, they when they make these walls in the models, we can see there's a artistic explanation in these models. Actually, they are like beautiful sculptures themselves. And so we are trying to write the language of architecture. These drawings, again, by Behnaz Motarjem. So we are trying to bring the language of architecture. I mean, there are words like 4 different type of ending the walls, how you can end the walls, and there's a grammar, how you can combine all these things to create a village. And sometimes the participants in our workshops actually they design, they freely design, they use the same materials, they learn how they can create architecture out of earth with the same techniques, and they completely bring up a new kind of architecture, like this observatory you see that these guys they made for the village. You see the model on left and the realized one on right. They were 8 students, and they made this observatory in 10 days. And I think after that, they really could feel how they can make everything out of the earth beneath their feet. And they really made a beautiful one. As you see this observatory, because it is a clear sky there, and you can use the observatory to watch the sky, and it's really fun. And sometimes the students out of the workshop, after the workshop, there are projects that, for example, this project you see here from the mayor of Tabas, the nearest city to the village. They offered the students to make a monument for them, and you know, they learned these old techniques, but they created a really beautiful contemporary, sustainable kind of monument. By the way, we are at the beginning of the way, but here in this short presentation, I tried to explain the point of view and the way that we are going on for finding a new sustainable architecture that will be suitable at least for desert area. This picture, I will finish with this picture. This is the picture of our first workshop with the students in this village. It was 4 years ago that we started. Thank you very much. I will finish here, and if you have any question, So Rosie, will pass it to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was so beautiful, and thank you for sharing all those images. Yes, if you have questions, please put them in the chat bar. But I guess, like, to start with, I think I was just totally fascinated about how these how this kind of like construction methods, which are only in the masons' heads and are passed down through word of mouth. How do you kind of feel about them being translated into more formal representations of architectural drawings and models in the way that the Western world might understand? But as in, was that part of the project? Like, I guess it seems like it was quite a core part of the project, like in really formalizing and like documenting and recording these processes so they aren't lost.
Rosie, actually more important than documenting is that how we can bring a tool for realizing these methods. I mean, a very simple tool that with using this tool, we can create the walls that you see exactly without any deformation on something like that. Let me bring something here to show you. So actually, this is like, you know, we had in Iran, also in India, we had traditional music. That this traditional music, it was not possible to write in new formats. And there were musicians that for first time they did it. So I can compare it to that. So this is one of the models that shows how it can be. And as you see, this is a very complicated geometrical form, and it has been done with a very, very simple tool made by 3 strings, just with 3 strings. So we are trying just to write them down. Still, it's not finished, but the most important thing is that how this tool can be very simple, because we don't have access to complicated stuff or material. And second one, it should be flexible. What we created should be flexible as it was before. I don't know if I hope I could answer the question. I'm not sure.
Well, I think also, I mean, maybe part of the motivation for recording these processes that they are that the material that is used is has a kind of low embodied carbon, like, because it's an earth material. So like, these are processes which could be used for sustainable construction. Was that also part of the kind of motivation, I guess?
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of the most important parts of the research. But at this moment, we are not focused over that. The thing is that at the moment, when we want to construct over there, we have 2 materials in hand. First, there are a lot of destroyed buildings. You can exactly use the materials of the destroyed building. The second one is that when you excavate the ground and you take the earth from the ground, so you have an underground, and you will use the same material coming from underground to make your adobes and making the walls. But we teach this stuff about the percentages of clay and sand and gravel and the other stuff, how we can make it strong. But there is need a serious research that we will do it in future about that, because we are not a lot of person at this moment. You know, this village is really far and really remote. We don't have a lot of person that they can stay there long.
I'm just trying to unmute Pop Architects, you've got a question. I think you're unmuted now.
Oh, hi. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, yeah.
Hi, no, thanks for the great presentation. It's a really fascinating project. I really enjoyed hearing about it. And my question was just whether, do you see these kinds of techniques being used, or would you like to see these kinds of techniques being used by architects somehow across Iran? And if so, how do you see that happening?
I don't see these techniques belonging to Iran. I see them. I would like to see them spread around the world in the places that they have similar climate and similar materials. So we cannot use them everywhere, because if there's somewhere that it rains a lot, for example in London, if you use that, it will be destroyed in 1 week. We cannot do that. But some parts can be used. For example, how we can make the walls. It's not dependent on the material, because you can have, for example, bricks and blocks, to compressed earth blocks also, and realize the walls. So some parts can be used everywhere. We are all connected today. I cannot see it belonging to this area. And we will learn also a lot from the other parts of the world. It's not that we're just inside ourselves. For example, the methods that we bring them to a scientific world, I learned a lot from Satber Maini, who is in India, who is in Auroville, if you know, they in Auroville Earth Institute. So we are all connected. Some parts can be used in all of the world, but the parts that is related to the material, it can use always in the same climate. It cannot be used in the other climate.
Great, thank you. And I think I can see my friend Nagar, who's in the audience and is the one that made the introduction. I wonder if you have a few words.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Pouya. It was great to hear that. And obviously, I'm originally from Iran and grown up in Iran. And when I moved to London, I was a bit shocked by the fact that that notion of vernacular architecture, even related to the UK, has completely disappeared. And I think I'm really interested in that process of participation between locals and architects. And in fact, the authority is not only an architect, but people, you know, in the village and in the locals. And I think what I was really interested to know, Pouya, what is the reaction of the local people that live in the villages about your project?
Okay, so it was Nagar, yes?
Yes.
So I should thank you a lot for also proposing Esfahk Mud Center to the program.
Yeah,
because of you, we are here, I think, because of you, if I'm right. So thank you very much. Actually, this point of view, the point of view that we have here, you're looking for, and we are looking for here, it's not really, I found that it's really strange for the villager, because the villagers, they don't see this kind of architecture in a positive way. Because before, not many years before, it's just 40 years, till 40 years ago, they used to live there, and they had a lot of problems. The living situation was very hard there. So they cannot imagine. This part is because of the facilities that they didn't have. Another part is that kind of architecture still needs to be completed. It's not like we take this architecture and we say everything was okay about that, because in last summer I went there. I stayed in one of these homes. Inside the home, it was terrible. It was so hot, like 50 degrees. It was outside, but inside, because the earth take the heat of the sun and it gives it back at night. It takes 12 hours that it gives it. At night that you want to sleep inside, you cannot stand that heat. But before, I know in that style of living, they used to, in summer, they used to sleep on the rooftop. They never stayed inside. So, by the way, with the lifestyle of today, we cannot use what they had before, and they cannot accept it to use. We should change it, and we should show it is possible. By the way, I see it's more possible for us to accept this kind of architecture than the villagers themselves. Still, the villagers, they didn't, because I expected that the villagers, they come back to their old village, because 6 homes they renovated. None of them, they can come back. Some of them, they work there. They have tourists, they gain money out of that. And so that's what I saw in these years.
Okay, that's really interesting. And do you see that as for example, is your research center is aiming to create this technique so then the local people can also use the technique and be able to build them themselves?
As I told here, the villagers, they are not interested, but the villagers, all the villagers, it's not important that all the villagers, they are not interested, but they are like 4 villagers, 4 or 5, that 2 of them, they started renovation of the village. They are really interested in this technique. So for the next month, I will go there, because I have translated their own techniques that I learned from them. I translated to the new method of construction to be able to teach to the architects in future. I will go there. Then together we will make with those 2-3 villages. There are not a lot. And in future, they will teach architecture. The villagers, they will be able to teach architecture students, because for teaching architecture students, you need another language. It's not, I mean, language, scientific language. We cannot just explaining and going on. So I think these 4, I hope they are enough, and in the future we see more.
Okay, thank you.
So I cannot predict the future. Negar, thank you very much for this, evening. Okay.
Well, great. Thank you so much for the presentation. And thank you for the discussion as well. We have lots more coming up in the program, but yeah, I think also, Negar, do you want to introduce the Iranian architect speaking next week as well?
Yes, so I think Pouya is the best to introduce him. Faramarz Parsi, that he has also worked with Pouya and has worked on renovation, Maramat, if I'm translating it right from Parsi. Pouya, maybe confirm that. Yeah, so I hand it to you, Pouya, for that introduction.
Actually, the story is that the 2 villagers, they started renovating the village because they saw another city named Yazd in Iran that they renovated their old buildings and it was successful. So one of them studied in Yazd, and they decided to renovate their old village. During the renovation of the first building, because they didn't know really the science of renovation and what they can do, but they started just to do something. The architect Faramarz was passing there by car and stopped there for tea, and he introduced himself to these guys and told them that I can help you for this. So they started to work together for renovations. So the office of Farmers, named Emarat Khorshid, this office helped them in a more scientific renovations. So now the buildings that are renovated, they are resistance against earthquake. I think there will be, I hope there will be no problem. And now it's beautiful, the renovated ones. There are a lot of tradition in this renovation. And next week, Farmers will tell you that how they renovated. We'll tell you the whole story and what techniques they used to renovate and how they look at renovation. I myself, I'm not a specialist in this one. And just in the middle of the day, farmers were working on that. And at the same time, I found the picture of this village. I organized workshop. I didn't know farmers. We were individual. So we started to talk together after that. And I was looking for a place to establish a research center for earthen architecture. I could not find it anywhere else. And farmers wanted to turn this school that you saw the pictures, the school of the village, to the research center, so we decided to do it together. And now I'm directing the research center.